Welcome to the Atlanta Sports Party, your home for the best Atlanta sports talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Maria Martin. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And our Atlanta Sports Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So is it finally trade day? And are the Falcons ready to bring that same energy from free agency to this draft? We'll chop it up. But first, let's talk about the champ. Number one, the guy in the opening day spot. The Atlanta Braves have named Spencer Strider their opening day starter. And we actually found out as well that Max Fried will be starting game 2. Of course, that opening day series against the Phillies at the Phillies is just a week away. Oh my goodness, how time has flown. But Jarvis, did Brian Snitker throw you, no pun intended, did Brian Snitker throw you a curveball with sending Spencer Strider out and as our opening day starter?
Absolutely not. Not for me, because when you talk about the guy going 20-5, he had a 3.86 ERA last year in his first full season as a starter, 281 strikeouts and 186 and 2/3, making the All-Star team. He finished top 5 in the Cy Young Award battling. Like, there's no reason if you take the name away and if you take Max Fried's name out of there, who's been the opening day starter for the past 3 years. Like, you look at those numbers, you're like, oh, yeah, this is the ace of your staff. And I said this before because we know what's about to go down with Max Fried. I think people don't want to talk about it, but we'll just leave it like that. But if you just take what he did last year, looking at the body of work and how he's been against Philadelphia, who they'll have the opening day start against at Philadelphia on March 28th, it makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah, because he's always done well, Maria, against the Phillies. And the one time when he didn't, of course, we knew that he was dealing with that oblique strain. So that was problematic. That was not of his doing. And I think that angry Spencer Strider is a good Spencer Strider. He was angry at how things ended last season, went into the offseason, got himself, I mean, he kind of already had the curveball in the arsenal. So we'll just say perfected the curveball. And Maria, how ridiculous has spring training been for Spencer Strider?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he has the zero ERA is just insane. I mean, he hasn't even allowed a run. Like, what does that even mean? You know, like, I can't even believe that we're talking about that. And so, yeah, I think the numbers speak for themselves. You know, he's the strikeout leader last year. He brings and exudes confidence, and that's what you want from your future ace. Now, I did think it was a little odd, only because Jarvis, you mentioned it, Max Fried, he's getting ready to enter the last year of his contract. So he is set to become a free agent next year. So it might have been a little bit of a nice nod to have Max Fried on the hill to start the season. So I was a little shocked, but what it tells me is that they are pointing towards Spencer more in the future. Max obviously had the last 3 starts, and now Spencer gets the ball. And it's nice because there's a lot of really good guys out there to choose from, but Spencer made it very easy. And what a way to start the season. Zach Wheeler and Spencer Strider in Philadelphia. Those Philly fans are going to bring it day one. I was doing a live shot in Philly. Right. I was doing a live shot in Philly before the playoffs. And it was the day that Spencer pitched. And all I could hear was this one crazy lady behind me just going crazy. And she was like, Spencer, Spencer. So we're going to get a lot more of that. I think that's the perfect tone to set for his year because he's going to have a good one.
Yeah, I think that the Braves have unofficially found themselves an in-division rival because no one else in this division has really given them fits over the last couple years. But it's like Philly kind of lives a little bit rent-free in their heads, especially in the postseason because they've done quite fine. They've owned them in the regular season, but the Phils have owned them the last couple of postseasons. And I think you do want to set a tone of saying, like, it's one thing to say, A, it's World Series or bust, B, but that's how we are every year. It's World Series or bust. But C, to go and say, but the guy who really, really embodies, we don't care. We believe we're that team, regardless of what you've done the last 2 seasons. I don't think there's any guy that's bolder than maybe Spencer Strider. Maybe you can throw in a Reynaldo Lopez Jr. I'll definitely say he's got some edge to him. But I think Spencer Strider is your guy on the bump to just kind of set the stage of not just what is going to happen on opening day, but I think that's kind of a message to the Phillies about what the Braves plan on doing to them this entire season. And I also like the fact that we kind of saw a really cool duel in the during spring training between Bryce Elder and Reynaldo Lopez. But just to know that you've got a guy like Reynaldo Lopez, Maria, where he's kind of interchangeable so that he extends your pitching rotation as your fifth starter. But at some point, Bryce is going to come back up and you can move Reynaldo Lopez into your bullpen and be quite confident that you have another guy that brings something great to the table.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Reynaldo Lopez has been a starter before and he's also been in the bullpen before. I mean, that is really good. I mean, talking about his interchangeability, his willingness to do whatever for this team is really good as well. And that was a lot of the reason why they brought him over. And when we talked to him at spring training, and I asked him, I said, is there one thing or the other that you actually kind of prefer? And he likes being a closer only because he likes the moment and the intensity of that moment and the feeling of coming in when the tension is high. He loves that, but it doesn't mean he doesn't love being a starter. He loves getting that opportunity. And I think Bryce Elder could honestly benefit from some more time down there in AAA. So I think this is the right move to start the year for sure. You rely on a guy who's done a lot more than Bryce Elder. Bryce needs to learn how to manage the workload of a Major League Baseball season a little bit better. He talked about that a lot this spring. So I think that giving him a little bit more time in AAA, he'll be just fine. But Reynaldo being stretched out as a starter, which they said at the beginning of spring, really indicated to me that they were looking at him first and Bryce second, giving Bryce the opportunity to step in there if he could win the job. And clearly he's had more downs than ups in spring. So it's the right move to keep him in AAA to start the year.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that we're starting to see some of those things that we wanted to see, but that we didn't quite see towards the end of the season where the injuries started to pile up. And when we're looking across the entirety of that pitching staff, when you have a player like him as a part of the pitching staff, I think that really does bode well for this team down the stretch. Now, free agency, it's quieted down a little bit for the Falcons, but does that mean things are then heating up for the draft? It's just a couple of weeks away. We'll chat about it when we come back. This episode of our Atlanta Sports Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. And that is so exciting because there are games on games on games that are happening in NCAA tournament play. Whether you're betting on a big upset, which always happens, or a 1 seed, which they went down a lot in conference play, so that could be upset central as well. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Is it going to be Houston? Is it going to be UConn? Who knows? But you certainly can get $200 to use on point spreads and money lines to pick the winner at the end. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Bet on college hoops. It's going to be a frenetic 3 weeks for you to do so until they cut down the nets. So, guys, we finally have the QB sweepstakes. Really, it looks like all across the NFL kind of squared away, but we think that the Falcons really kind of started that domino effect. So at the end of the day, getting their guy, Kirk Cousins, I think was the most important thing to do to say, hey, we're making a stance. We're making a strong statement coming out of the gates in free agency that we understand. We believe that we're a quarterback away. So let's just go get that quarterback and then we can start dealing. And you think about this. I think we've all kind of conjectured, Maria, off season of who really made the call on Desmond Ridder, right? We kind of always thought Marcus Mariota, that was kind of an Arthur Smith call, but Desmond Ridder, that was kind of questionable. Well, now it's interesting to kind of see where the influence came from as we are, I guess, like a week or so removed from Kirk Cousins becoming a Falcon. How much influence do you think that Raheem Morris had in bringing in a veteran QB like Kirk Cousins for the vision that he has for a team that thinks they're a quarterback away?
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a ton of influence, although I do know that you know, the previous regime talking about Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot as a tandem. Obviously, Terry's still here, but I do know that they had thoughts of veteran quarterbacks this past offseason. So it's not like this is a brand new idea. It's not like Raheem, at least in my opinion and my belief, I don't think that he came in and said, this is the way it's going to be or nothing. I think this was really a collaborative effort. But I do think that for head coaches, in my opinion, it's very tricky to tie yourself to a rookie quarterback or someone who is just getting started in the league. You know, he gets a brand new opportunity, Raheem, for the first time in about a decade or over a decade or so. I don't think you want to link yourself to someone who's still figuring it out, right? And everyone is very upset by. So in his mind, it's let me go get somebody who at least I know what he can do. Kirk Cousins has shown you that for 12 years. Granted, the Achilles is new, but you know what he did before. He's been consistent throughout the 12 years that he's played in the NFL. So I think Raheem definitely came in here and said, look, we got to make a change. This is very clear that the quarterback play sent the previous coach out the door. He even said that multiple times. So what can I do? I can go get a veteran who I know will win us games. That I think was where he started. And then you could see he's building the pieces around in some of those free agent signings that they did offensively specifically. They're trying to elevate Kirk and not just lean on all the young guys who are very talented, but also trying to get some veterans around him too. So I think Raheem had a good influence on it. I just don't think it was completely him.
Yeah. And I think when you have the opportunity to have a veteran QB like a Matthew Stafford and see what he was able to do, it's kind of hard to look away. And I always say like deep veteran experience versus light veteran experience, because it's not like Justin Fields doesn't have a couple years and it's not like he's a rookie, but more of that deep, like you said, over a decade of experience of showing a consistency there that does matter. But you're right, Maria. There were talks and have been talks about a veteran, because Taylor Heineke may not be a deep veteran, but I mean, Jarvis, he's a veteran nonetheless that was brought in to kind of be QB2, but also kind of to be a little bit of a competition, if you will, with Desmond Ridder. But where do you kind of see the influence that Raheem Morris had, or kind of his imprint? And I'll kind of expand it to what Maria said, not just imprint on the QB, but kind of imprint across how he's building out his offense.
I think he took a look at this roster and kind of understood that, hey, they were a quarterback away. Like Maria mentioned, he said that, hey, if they had better quarterback play, he wouldn't be here. Arthur Smith would probably still have his job. And the one constant that we've seen since in the Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot regime is that they picked in the top 10. I went back and looked this up. Well, when Kirk Cousins was a starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, they never picked in the top 10. Never.
Say it again.
Right, for the people in the back.
Never. As a matter of fact, the Minnesota Vikings haven't picked in the top 10 since 2014. Anthony Barr, the edge rusher out of UCLA. Say
it again.
Wow. You took it back with Anthony Barr, but you're right.
Yes, consistency. Consistency is the key. And I think that competitive urgency that Raheem Morris throws out, that kind of comes to me too, right? Because in order to be competitive, you got to be consistent. That's what it was, so inconsistent as far as the quarterback play goes. So when you bring in a guy like Kirk, like I said, I still have my reservations coming off an Achilles injury. Sure. 36 years old when his season starts. I get it. That's where I'm at with it. But once he gets on the field and he's healthy, we pretty much know what you're going to get by at least about $4 grand throwing and probably about 28 to 35 touchdowns. Like, hey. And that's cool. And the Falcons will take that. I remember the last time the quarterback played like that, 2016, at 33 points a game.
Exactly. And we're talking about a former league MVP.
Exactly. So when you talk about, and the Falcons don't even need that MVP play, right? In order to get to where they want to be, and that's to get into the playoffs and win, and by winning division and NFC South. So I think that if the Falcons, because the Falcons have averaged over 20 points at all since Arthur Smith been here. Yeah. So all those things come into play, and you look at it, and I think Rob looked at it and said, you know what? Here's how I can fix 85% of the issues that they had last year. Now, granted, you want to be able to improve certain aspects of the football, specifically the defensive side, and get some young talent over there, some young cheap talent to be specific. That's also what that 2016 team had as well on the defensive side of the football. So I think there's some continuity as to what this team can be because there's precedent that's been set, right? You got a high scoring offense and you got a defense that got a young defense that can go out there and go make plays for you in the secondary and in that linebacker core. So yeah, I feel like Ross saw all those things and said, you know what, give me a veteran so I can get rid of that headache, and then I figure out the rest.
Yeah, there's like a certain level of comfort that comes with a veteran quarterback too. You say headache, and that's kind of what you think about when you're dealing with someone younger. It's not a bad thing, and there's learning curves for everybody, and every veteran was not a veteran at one point. So all of those things can be true. But where the Falcons are right now, a veteran always made sense to me, because you just hand Raheem the keys to everything, and then he gets to look at the quarterback and say, go be you, go do your thing, instead of here's how we do things. There's a difference. And so I think, especially with Zach Robinson being a first-time coordinator, all he has to do is be like, yo, you and I be on the same page and life is good. And I think it's going to be a seamless transition, because it's somebody that's 36 versus somebody who's 23. And that is very, very different. And again, there's not one better than the other, but in this instance, I think the veteran makes more sense for the Atlanta Falcons in the time that they are in right now.
And I think too, the veteran vetted the Falcons. And I feel like with some of the information that was gleaned out of the press conference with Kirk Cousins, and even things that he said since joining the Falcons, has shown that he did his due diligence to make sure it was a good fit for him as well. I don't think that he would have walked away from a situation for the Vikings if he didn't feel like A, it was going to be good for him, and B, he could not compete at a high level and have a team that was going to compete at a high level with him. And also going back to the influence of Raheem Morris and even Terry Fontenot, you got to give them a nod as well for not kind of kowtowing, because the league is all about copycat. And a lot of teams are going to try their best to turn, whether it's Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or whomever, into, oh, he's going to be CJ Stroud for us. No, he might be Bryce Young for you. You don't know. And that's no knock on Bryce Young. It just simply means that you never know. You're not looking at all of what DeMeco Ryans and the Texans had to work with. So it was CJ Stroud, but a lot of it was also everything else that the Texans brought to the table, including jumping to number 3 to get Will Anderson, and then Will Anderson producing for them. So I think that Raheem and Terry deserve a lot of credit for that as well. Not saying kind of jumping on that gravy train of thinking, oh, we're going to be, copycats, and we're going to be able to reproduce exactly what the Texans did last season. Now, the other piece there is this: Kirk Cousins was the first domino to fall, Jarvis, but there have been many dominoes since then, big names that have fallen in free agency across the NFL. So now you kind of think, other than maybe a small signing here and there, the Falcons are probably shifting their attention to the draft, which is just a few weeks away. How do they now focus on making significant upgrades to the defense, probably through the draft?
Oh, I think the focus has to be from here on out. If we're talking about specifically the draft and upgrading that defensive side of the football, it has to be one, for me, is edge rusher, and 2 is cornerback.
Yeah.
And I think that they are going to have some good options at 8. And I think that's why I feel like the Falcons are really in a really good spot, because I feel like there's going to be a wide receiver drop down that's going to be available when they come to 8, and then they might get an offer they can't refuse, and you're going to pick up a second-round pick, and Lord knows I would not mind at all if they were to draft a quarterback in that second round, a guy like Michael Penix, who I feel is probably going to go in that second round, unless people start getting super desperate, so to speak. They start flying off that board in the top 10. But for me, I feel like you have to start at the edge rusher spot and then kind of work your way to that corner, because I feel like there are going to be some guys available. You might be able to get the best corner in the draft at 8, and you might be able to get the best edge rushers. They're going to have some serious decisions to make come draft night, because I feel like they're going to be in a very advantageous spot as far as being able to get the best defensive player in this draft.
Yeah. And I think too, Maria, I would agree with the Falcons being in maybe the most viable position that they've been in some time, because now they've gotten their quarterback out of the way. Now they can start to play around, and they put a few pieces around him as well. And in addition to maybe trying to decide, do you go with that edge rusher or do you get a corner? You kind of think about that O-line, and it's not perfect. It's still going to need some pieces. And you got very lucky with Matthew Bergeron being able to get up to speed so very quickly. But that's another place where if there's an O-line run sort of at the top of the draft, then that gives them an opportunity to maybe get a really good one in that second run. Or, hey, look, I wouldn't be mad if they got an O-lineman in the first round either. Like, I truly would not be. It just kind of has to be the right one on the right side. You know where I'm going with that one. But just saying. But I think the other piece there is this, like Jesse Bates is going to need some help as well. So there may be some opportunity there. I'll just say DB in the DB route to get some help.
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing I want Falcons fans to remember when they feel like all hope is lost and things are so terrible, Jarvis,
I'm always being talked to like this.
Right, I know Maria's
always got to talk like this.
Yeah, Maria's setting us up for it. I feel it. I know where she's going.
But I'm serious. Like, things are not that bad, right? And I'm going off of what you were talking about. You know, they have the 8th pick in the draft, and a draft that I think that can really help the Falcons. There's a lot of quarterbacks that will have the run of them at the top. This is an incredible offensive line class, like we've talked about before. So there's going to be a pretty good run at offensive linemen. And then the receiver class is stacked, which means not everybody's going to get to have a receiver, which means the Falcons could have a good one in the second round, like you said, Jarvis. So there are plenty of options, though. I actually was on the belief before all of the flurry of free agent signings on the offensive side of the ball happened, I thought maybe you look at some of those offensive pieces in the first round. Now I'm leaning more defense, and especially with Chase Young signing with the Saints, there is some pressure on the Falcons to get something done, right?
That next one out too. Why you at it?
Yeah. So, and like you said, you know, Jesse Bates is going to need some help for sure. I think you can add at any position on the defensive side of the ball for the Falcons. I know that that side of the ball has really carried this team. However, they do need help and they need depth, and that has been lacking in the last couple of years. So edge is the first priority for me, though I do believe they need a bunch of different things. I know the Dallas Turner thing has been thrown out there a lot lately, and I'm not saying it would be fantastic, but he could go earlier than 8. You don't know. There's a lot of things that'll happen that I think will surprise a lot of people in this draft. This is one of the trickier ones because there are those quarterbacks at the top, but there's so many good positions this year. I think it's a tricky draft to navigate. So I have no idea where they're going to be at 8. They could go so many different directions, but defense is certainly a need.
Indeed, indeed. And we know that Jarvis was just hoping, wishing, and praying, Maria, you wouldn't say, but what they could do, although we don't like it, if Marvin Harrison Jr.
No, not doing that.
Okay. All right. So I just had to get Jarvis's attention. All right. Anyway, when we
got it.
Back,
you got it. My ears are peaked.
I want to make sure his ears are peaked because, you know, that's what I do. But anywho, I've got a question for you guys. Is it finally Dre Day? I know you're going to tell me on the other side when we go around the metro.
Listen up, folks. This episode of the Atlanta Sports Party is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever been in a situation where you've just been trying to find some tickets? You don't have to worry because Game Time has got you covered. It is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat. All-in prices is very important because you know how they be trying to hit you upside the head with those fees. So, yeah, Game Time doesn't do that. They got the all-in prices right there. And you can see views from your seat and the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So, I'm telling you guys, you need to go there as soon as you finish this episode. You know, I don't want you to go there right now because we got some good stuff coming up for you. All right. And they had deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. And even an hour after it starts, it's the place to find last minute deals. I'm talking about exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and much, much more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. Now, make sure you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, listen up. Create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today for last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. Also, folks, let me also tell you something else. You want to come Locked On Sports Atlanta Insider? I need you to go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Sports Atlanta. That's joinsubtext.com/Locked On Sports Atlanta. Guess what? Maria mentioned Dallas Turner. I did my full breakdown on Dallas Turner. You know the Falcons have set a meeting to meet with him before the draft. So yeah, if this is the guy that the Falcons need to take, I give you my full breakdown right there on Subtext. And also you can communicate with me and tell me how you feel about my breakdown as well. So yeah, go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Sports Atlanta and become a Locked On Sports Atlanta insider today.
There's no happier place in the world than Jarvis breaking down film on a defensive player. It is the happiest of happy places for him. Anywho, guys, let's go around the Metro. Let's start with Trae Young. Of course, we know that Trae is still out, but there have been pieces, people, players who've stepped up to the plate and kind of made a difference in the role, sort of like they always say, next man up. Well, DeAndre Hunter has really been that, but he's been doing it from the bench, Jarvis. He's really, really been productive, averaging 16 points per game, shooting 40% from the three-point line, and really been doing that, kind of hovering around the 25 to 29-minute mark. I think I've only seen him go over 30 minutes one time since he's been back from that injury. And I got to tell you guys, when he first started coming off the bench, I was concerned because I wasn't sure if he was going to be receptive to not being a starter, but it seems like he's really embraced that role and kind of found his sweet spot. So it's Dre Day again. It seems like Jarvis, DeAndre Hunter, and the Atlanta Hawks have found a nice little place for their marriage.
I mean, you got to give Quinn Snyder the credit, right? Because this is why you brought him in. Because we know Bogdanovich, what he brings off the bench and everything. He's been thrust into a starting role with all the injuries that the Hawks have had to deal with towards the end of this season, right? So these are the type of situations where you find out how good a coach is. So for him to be able to say, hey man, here's my plan for you. Here's how I feel you're going to be successful. All you got to do is just listen to what I say and be aggressive and take advantages of those matchups you're going to have in those second lineups, which he's been doing consistently, especially running at the 4 and just being able to put the ball on the floor. It's just been a joy to see, because I know when the Hawks re-signed him for that 4 years, $95 million, and you start seeing those starter minutes, I'm just like, bruh, you look lost out on that floor. But now his role has been clearly defined, and I have to give most of the, if not all, the credit to Quinn Snyder.
Yeah, Maria, I think there are just players who, like Jalen Johnson, the example for him is he just needed the opportunity to define his game, but the mental piece was there and all the other pieces were there. He just needed to be molded and shaped. Now he's the guy that we're all like, I don't think any of us knew he could be that guy. Dre's the opposite. We all thought he was going to be that guy walking through the door, and we would only get flashes of it, but never the consistency. Maria, this might be the most consistent version of DeAndre Hunter we've seen since the Hawks drafted him.
Yeah, you certainly got to give Q a lot of credit, right? He's someone who we all believed as soon as he stepped through the door could get the best out of his players. And that started with Trae Young, and we were hoping that he could get the best out of Trae, but you're starting to see it in other players because Trae is not playing right now. And I think having that energy put on a guy like Dre, who kind of needed it, has been really lovely. I mean, you're watching him completely transition his game. Q's talking about him being a mismatch offensively. Like, we weren't talking about DeAndre Hunter being that at all. And he's really showing versatility for the first time in a long time. And DeAndre, unfortunately, has had a lot of injuries up and down. Ever since college, it's just kind of been a snowball effect for Dre, and that's the mental piece for him. I'm sure there was an element of it, and then he's buried in these lineups, and he's not being featured the way he probably feels like he could be. But Q's starting to figure out where he fits best, and it's really nice. I mean, especially with Trae being out, it's allowing DeAndre to kind of flex that a little bit more and show what he can do. So I think give Quinn Snyder a lot of credit here, because this was the player that we all believed, and maybe even a little bit better than we thought he could be.
Yeah. And then you look at some of the other pieces like Onyeka Okongwu, he was starting to give you some help on the wing. and he was starting to open up his offensive game. And then all of a sudden he goes down out of nowhere. And now he's going to probably be on minutes restriction for the remainder of the regular season. So now you've lost kind of that bridge guy who can sometimes come in and be a starter. And quite honestly, have been giving you a bit more than Clint Capella had been giving you in the starting lineup. But he can also be that guy coming off the bench who, to your earlier point, Jarvis, was like a secondary to, okay, we know we're going to get it from Bogey coming off the bench. The next guy up from the bench is Onyeka, right? Now, DeAndre Hunter is that guy. He's really kind of your 1A and your 1B because, like we said, Bogey is in the starting lineup. And then you've got Onyeka Okongwu slowly but surely coming back, but he'll be on a minutes restriction. Also, you kind of look at this team and you say to yourself, okay, 14 games left in this season. Injuries make them go up and down. The one thing that doesn't go up and down is their standing. They are ensconced in that 10th seed. It's like no matter what you do, 3.5 up to get to the Bulls won't happen because of tiebreakers. 3.5 down to get to the Nets probably still won't happen because, well, the Nets are netting. But ultimately speaking, where do you kind of see the Hawks down this stretch and how they approach the stretch? And the reason I asked the question that way, Maria, is you still have opportunities in the league for load management. So that could be to rest the players and make sure that nobody else gets injured. But on the same token, optics, that might not look so great because you don't really still can't quite afford to just rest on your laurels. It just does. It's not a good look. So just kind of wondering how you see them proceeding or approaching the last 14 games of the season.
I mean, the way that I see it shaking out, the way that they are is kind of where they're going to finish. Barring some kind of freak thing with Chicago, I think that the Hawks are going to finish exactly where they are. Now, the good news about that, there's good and bad to it. Obviously, we wish that it wasn't like this and they could just be in the playoffs and the end. But that's not the way that the Hawks play basketball. And again, injuries, as you mentioned, especially down the stretch, have really hindered that. But I think getting a lot of these guys healthy may make them kind of dangerous when it comes to being a play-in team because we haven't seen them at their full strength in a long time. There's been one guy's in, one guy's out, and Onyeka randomly goes down. Then Jalen's back in and Trey's still out, and Trey's a guy who this is the longest stretch he's ever been absent from the basketball court. You put him back in the right scenario, the right time, it could do one of two things. It could blow up everything they've been working on, or it could transcend them into the next level. So, I think it's going to be very hard for them to get out of where they are right now. I totally see them staying status quo and finishing the way that they are.
Yeah. I would say the same, Jarvis. And, my only thing is I'm going to say something. I'll try to end on a positive note, but I got to say what I got to say. My thing is it's dangerous. For me, it's like it's dangerous for them to get good because what I don't want is for Landry Fields and company to think that the Hawks are okay. So as much as I don't want them to, I don't want to sound negative, like lose.
No.
I also
thank you. Preach. Yes.
Yeah, I really want them to see how important it is. Like you're still in the 10th spot. Like no matter what, even if you make a run, and even if you give a team like the Celtics the blues yet again in the opening round, should you make it there, you are still a broken toy that needs to be fixed.
For sure. Yeah,
we appreciate you guys stopping by the Atlanta Sports Party. The Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube channel is now streaming live 24/7. It's all things Atlanta sports 24/7. And remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because this show is not a broken show. This toy is always working. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. And we will see you on the Atlanta Football Party on Monday.